No one's going to live this thing out in a wrong way. No one's going to pretend they've got this message and then live some way other than it. If you claim to be a follower of Jesus, then you got to follow Him all the way. Even if you're Peter. Even if you're James. If you don't fully accept the Gentiles and the Jews together, if you don't fully accept that the law is over and that we are now living by grace, if you don't accept that, then you are not part of this message. Nobody messes with my message. Paul's pretty upset about this. One more. If we keep reading, we come to Galatians chapter 2, 17. And we get Paul just going off on a sermon. I mean, he's preaching it now. He says, if while we seek to be justified in Christ, it becomes evident that we ourselves are sinners, does that mean that Christ promotes sin? What Paul says is, if I'm living by grace and I mess up and I sin, does that mean that Jesus wants me to sin? Because if I don't have the law, I can do anything I want, right? So if Jesus is giving me that freedom and then I do something stupid, if I do something that's morally incompatible with the rest of the Old Testament, because I'm free, if I do something, does that mean that Jesus made me free so that I can do that stuff? Does that mean Jesus made me free so I can live a morally corrupt life? Can we blame Jesus for my moral corruption because He's released me from this law? Paul says, no. No, that's not what I'm talking about at all. Absolutely not. If I rebuild what I destroyed, I prove that I'm a lawbreaker. For through the law, I died to the law so that I might live for God. I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave Himself for me. I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness could be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing. See, Paul is saying the Old Testament story is done. The Old Testament story is over. It was a story, and the law wasn't the entire story. The law only exists for a portion of that story, a portion of the story that was intended not to fix everything, but to point us to the one who would fix it. That law wasn't where it started with freedom. The law was just what happened in the middle so that God could bring about the salvation of people through Jesus. And so Jesus would live by the law, He would fulfill the law, He would die under the law, and now you and I can die with Him. The judgment hasn't yet happened. But what has happened is that Jesus has created a bubble of the new reality, the new kingdom, that you and I can enter into the same way He got there, by death. Paul says, no one messes with my message. No one ever has messed with my message. And not even I am going to mess with this message. The last thing that you can write down, I refuse to let even myself mess with this message. You know why? Because I'm dead. Paul says, am I going to live however I want to live? No, I'm dead. Paul says, am I going to engage in morally questionable activities? No, I'm dead. Paul says, am I going to worry about the law? No, I'm dead. Paul says, I am dead, and the life I live is Jesus in me. See, the ultimate reality of this message is not that you are free to do what you want to do, but you are free to do anything that God has created for you to do by simply dying like Jesus and letting Him live in you. I want to challenge you and encourage you today that don't let anyone, not even yourself, stand in the way of you experiencing this gospel, this good message, this freedom. Don't let anyone get in your way. Have you heard people give you a message that you're not good enough, that you don't measure up? Don't let them get in your way. Have you seen people live in a way that's distracting you from God's will for your life? Don't let them get in your way. Do you have habits in your life that you've been struggling with that you can't overcome? Is there a perpetual sin? Is there an attitude in your heart that you know God isn't pleased with? Don't let it get in your way. God has called you to live freely because Jesus has died and the law is done and the life is here for you. Renounce all sin and claim by faith the death of Christ. And then live. Live. Live by Him, live for Him, live in Him, live with Him through you, in Him alone. He is your Lord. His word is your authority. His life is your life. His death is your death. Jesus, Jesus. Only Jesus, always Jesus. He's the first and the last. He's the beginning. He's the end. He is the author and the finisher and the perfecter, and He is your life. So live it with Him. Would you bow your heads with me?